Don't cross the streams.
Why?
It would be bad.
I'm fuzzy on the whole good-bad thing. What do you mean bad?
Try to imagine all life as you know it stopping instantaneously and every molecule in your body exploding at the speed of light.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes. We've been kind of monitoring the financial issues over at IDW for basically the lifetime of this channel. Now is one of the first videos that I did on Thinking Critical, and it always seems to be getting worse, although we were unsure about what was going to happen with COVID-19, but we do have new information. Here to talk with me about this is my good friend Perch. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
So we were concerned that IDW would be one of the smaller publishers, and they're not even that small. They're the fourth largest publisher of comic books in North America, that they might be one of the publishers that weren't going to make it because they already had a lot of financial issues, a lot of debt. They haven't been able to really secure financing on via traditional means in a couple of years now because of their credit rating and things like that. Like I said, a lot of debt on the books, and now we have a official word that they've let a couple of their senior staffers go after COVID-19. Originally they were furloughs, now they're layoffs. Was this expected to you? Is there more to come?
Well, I think it's expected. I mean, from the conversations you and I have had, something was going to have to happen. Their business model was to get acquired, of course, and I think to basically have that run. And when they had trouble getting financing, I mean, the only other route you have left is to do some layoffs. There's nothing left to you. You've got to cut costs. So I mean, it's not terribly surprising. I mean, the question for me is, I think outside of the COVID situation, would they have been in the same position anyway? I think they probably would have. The money wasn't there even before this, and I think it's a symptom of where they've come.
Yeah, of course, a lot of their financial issues are because they went and decided to finance some, shows in-house. The big one on cable would be Winona Earp. Then they financed a couple of streaming shows, October Faction and V-Wars for Netflix. Mm-hmm. All that was internal. They footed all the bill. Finally, they do have somewhat of a hit with Lock and Key, which was a bigger name title, but Netflix had a part in financing that, so they actually advertised it, and they're getting a second season, but it sounds like all the other shows are kind of going down the drain.
Yeah, October Faction and V-Wars didn't take, and it's an interesting lesson out there. People can say this is fair or not fair, but when you're on a platform like Netflix, and they do not have as big a financial incentive to promote it, they've got a lot of shows coming out every week. Of course, they're going to promote their own stuff, the places where they have more of an upside, which they did for Lock and Key, and we saw that work. I'm not sure that October Faction or V-Wars would have necessarily done that much better with more advertising, but certainly better than what it did. I mean, it got lost very quickly on the Netflix palette, and like you said, then IDW took the brunt. They were hoping for a surprise kind of pop out of that, but you look at every show that really has been successful on Netflix, it's usually you can trace it back to Netflix helping promote it.
Absolutely. You want to be in that new release bar. You want to be one of the first 3 or 4 titles. You want to be in the action series kind of thing where you're one of the first things that you see. You don't have to people looking for it, because while Netflix is better than most of the other platforms, it's still really hard to find stuff that they don't want you to see.
Yeah, if it falls off the front page, you're not going to see it. It's really, the search mechanism is not great. Like you said, it's better than other platforms, but still, there's so much content out there, and you see just from the numbers that Netflix publishes that it's all at the stuff at the front page, the above the fold, for using an old publishing term. That's the stuff that wins. And so IDW, I mean, it was a gamble. It was one that didn't seem to really particularly pay off. It did show investors. And so, I mean, the other half of it, I think that maybe was successful. It showed potential acquirers and investors that they did have the capability to get a show done, that they were able to finance it themselves, to foot the bills, like you said, and run it. And that's going to be valuable. The problem is, I just don't know who the buyers are out there for them right now. That's the tough part.
Well, especially right now, a lot of the entertainment companies, there's no movies out there. People are losing all kinds of revenue via advertising. It's all down and everything like that. So there's not a lot of entertainment companies that are just flush with cash looking to acquire new things, even if they do have a streaming platform.
Yeah, it's right now. I think to win in Hollywood at this level, if you're a company like this, you have to have some unique hook. You either have to be bringing some talent on some long-term commitments. You have to have a new way of filming movies that maybe is primarily green screen, and you really just know that technology. You can get things down, and you do not have to do a lot of on-location shoots. I mean, there's different ways you can do it, but IDW is more of a traditional studio in that regard. They don't have that ability, and so it's going to be hard for them to be found. And unfortunately, that has led to layoffs, and it's not good news for the comic industry. Not necessarily whether you like IDW or hate IDW. This isn't good news because we need more publishers. We need more opportunities for people to go out and find things.
Now let's talk about the actual layoffs that we know of, and these aren't like little things here. These are important people that have been with IDW really kind of from the beginning. The big one is Denton Tipton, the IDW managing editor, up until he was furloughed. You know, he's been with the company since the beginning. He is in charge of basically their entire editorial staff. That is an enormous loss. And from the people I've talked to, he has a really good reputation in the industry.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, they're senior people. Generally, when we see these layoffs, and it's almost one of these painful jokes, I guess, that people make, is that the upper level people get protected, and it impacts the lower level, the middle group. But here you've got Denton Tipton, like you said, you've got Gilberto. I'm going to butcher that last name, but the senior graphic artist. You've got some really senior people, and probably the most alarming one for me in terms of how they were positioning themselves and what they were doing is Spencer Reeve, who was had a pretty long reputation for being a brand marketing manager and managing some of this outreach, and that's something they need right now. So that's surprising to me as a cut.
Yeah, the huge losses. I'm absolutely floored that they would let people with that much experience within their company just go right now. This is the time where you want to have those all hands on deck that can really get the best stories out there and get some buzz going for IDW, because outside of their licensed property, it's unfortunately not really there. They have one of the best science fiction comic books in the entire industry called The Kill Lock with Livio Ramondelli. He's writing it. He's illustrating it. The man is a phenomenal artist. His work with robots is beautiful. Of course, he's a veteran artist with Transformers, so you would imagine that he would be good at that. Nobody's heard of it. The word is hardly out there. Anytime I promote that book and viewers go and read it, I always get a comment saying, "Thank you, that book is amazing," because they're not getting the word out themselves.
Yeah, I think the company can produce talent. So, if you look at it critically, I think the company does have an eye for some unique stories. I think that they've shown an ability to bring in things that you didn't necessarily know existed and turn good stories out of them. I think they have a lot of positive aspects to them as a company in terms of what they can do and what they can produce. But like you said, they've got a lot of books that are hidden. I think Kill Lock, you're driving more traffic, more readers, I think, to that book than IDW is right now, which is not a good thing. Like you say, that's a great book. You introduced me to it, honestly, and it's not being promoted. I think there's a couple stories like that within IDW. So there is something that's not working. I mean, this is how you dig yourself out of the hole. You start to promote work, you start to get things out, and I don't know how they dig themselves out of the hole now.
Yeah, it sucks because, a couple of years ago, they had The Highest House out, which was one of the better fantasy comics. You don't get a lot of great fantasy. IDW was producing one of them. The writer from there, he's now on DC's, Black Label on the Joe Hill House comic book. I can't remember which one he's writing. Also Kanto, I just interviewed the creative team on the channel here. That one they seem to be putting a little bit more muscle behind because it kind of hit a little bit bigger. I think because the visuals specifically and people realizing it was kind of associated with Wizard of Oz a little bit. But that's another great book. And so they are a great place to find talent and get some unique stuff out there that's different than what Marvel and DC are putting out. Unfortunately, it's probably going to dry up a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, so these are layoffs we know about, of course. The other thing that's happening that doesn't get reported is that they've got a lot of creative talents that are freelancers that are just not getting work right now. It's that pencils down moment. They're just not producing. So in addition to, you see these high profile layoffs, and you're like, oh, well, of course, this at least isn't hitting the creators. It already has hit the creators. They're not producing books. This is hitting the ability for them to edit, manage, promote, and market those books that aren't being made. So if no content is being made, or much less content is being made, again, their whole business model is to, get something to hit and then, be able to turn it into film properties, entertainment, license it out. That's what they're trying to do. And so if they're not producing the work, they're making smaller bets. There's less likelihood that something's going to hit, and it spirals. And so it's a tough time for a lot of people right now. But as I've said to some people online, this isn't a good thing for the comic industry. And I hope I'm trying to figure out what's their exit plan, how they get out, how do they recover from this. It's tough when you see these kinds of layoffs.
So speaking of the creators, obviously, like I just mentioned, David Booher, the writer of Canto, Drew Zucker, the artist from Canto, they were recently on the channel, and they said they continued working through COVID-19 and pencils down and all that stuff. But we know that wasn't all of IDW. In fact, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles until very recently was the second best-selling non-Big Two book in the entire industry, right behind Spawn. Of course, now we've seen the Boom Studios Power Rangers TMNT book the sales are above there. And then we also had Mirko Andolfo's Mercy, as
right.
well as what was the other Image book that hit big? Well, there was another one out there. It was also a big hit. It has actually had more sales than Mercy. But TMNT is an important title for IDW. We know that Sophia Campbell was told pencils down. That is really their flagship comic series. And we know that Larry Hama, one of the best writers in action writers in comic history, he was told pencils down on the G.I. Joe book, which has one of the most fervent, reliable fan bases in comics. So it's definitely affecting the creators as well.
It is. No, and some books will kind of continue, and I suspect some of those books that continue will be done for monetary reasons. Either there's already some traction on getting some licensing or some stuff out of it, so they want to complete the run, or maybe the page rate is lower for those books. Who knows why some books are continuing more than others? But like you said, there's some big flagship creators and books that are being told to pause. And again, right now, if you are IDW and you're trying to maximize your shareholders' investment, you're trying to do more, having some of these bigger properties hit big is really the antidote you need to survive. And it's grim when you see news like this. It's eyebrow raising when you see the senior staff that's being let go.
Do you expect that we're going to see more of these layoffs from IDW in the future? And do you think it's going to trickle down to other publishers, or other publishers not going to quite come out of COVID-19 unscathed?
No, well, absolutely. I think it's going to impact other publishers. I don't know that we'll get the same announcements. I think a lot's being happened that's just kind of quiet right now in the industry. We've lost a lot of people. We're just not hearing about it. I think that's definitely going to continue, especially with the smaller publishers. IDW is more likely, because of their standing and kind of how their investments work and their nature of a company, they're going to have to issue press releases on some of this stuff. Most companies won't. But this, keep in mind, the IDW did this after receiving the loans as well. I mean, they got some of the protection loans, and they got some investment in several months ago, and they still had to do these layoffs. That's not a good sign. I think that there will absolutely be more impact throughout the industry, and I think we're going to see a deep erosion of the indie market.
All right, so if you had to make a prediction right now, in 18 months, is IDW still publishing comic books?
Unfortunately, I would say no. I want to be wrong. I really want to be wrong in this sense. But I think they've got to. You can get yourself into a financial situation where the hill to climb is just far too big, and I think it's a very, very tough hole they've got to dig themselves out of. I don't know exactly how they do that. It's possible. It's definitely going to be a much reduced IDW, but I think their odds of survival, they've just got a lot of debt. I think they have a lot going against them, and I hope they can find a way out of it. I really do.
So we do know that they hired, some analysts last year to look into selling off parts of IDW and maybe making some of their money back that way. At this point, you know, with all the debt, and they wouldn't be able to bring the licenses with them, I don't believe. Do you see anybody taking a bite and maybe wanting to acquire those IDW original IPs and bringing them into the fold, like a Dark Horse, maybe a Boom?
Well, I mean, I don't. I remember we talked about this, I think, about 6 months ago, and I think it was a long shot then. I think now it's an incredible long shot. I mean, who's got the financial reserves to do it? We see that we've seen hits with Marvel at the top, and I mean, let alone the smaller guys with what's going on with COVID and the shutdown and everything else. I just don't know who has the capital to make that interesting. I think IDW's got some limits to what they could sell for. They could go down, you know, they could do it in a fire sale, but they can only go down so far, and I just don't know who could afford even that number right now.
Yeah, it doesn't look good. It does look pretty grim. Hopefully they bounce back. They get a couple of hits, and we're talking about in hopefully in 18 months, you and I are eating crow, and we're saying IDW is healthy financially, and they're putting out good comic books.
Yeah, I definitely want that to be the case. Anybody listening to this right now knows I I want them to survive. I think, you know, the one thing they can do, and it requires a ton of focus and definitely some luck, is figure out your 5-6 titles that you really want to put all your energy behind. You know, trim your line, whatever else you have to do, and just market aggressively these books, like Kill Lock. You know, turn the thing completely, and just be relentless with getting the message out and marketing it, doing everything you can possibly do from a book perspective, using your social media accounts to their utmost, and just bring some momentum to those IPs. That's what they've got to do. They've just got to do a razor focus on those titles. But you know, history would suggest that they just don't do that. So, you know, here's hoping. I want to be wrong. I do.
Well, I'm with you, brother, and I really appreciate the time.
Absolutely.
If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. I would appreciate it very much. It helps us attract more views for the channel. Subscribe for future commentary, comic book news, and reviews. And don't forget to ring the bell for notifications. If you want to talk comics, movies, and much, much more, you can follow me on Twitter at Wes_from_TC. With that, Salamat Po, and I'm out.